How are you?
And there's some common sense.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm pleased to hear that I did. when
it starts. I'm going to assume that just worked. This special meeting of the Board of Education for Portland Public Schools of April 2nd, 2020 is called to order. This meeting is being audio streamed live on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. This meeting is also being audio streamed live on our PPS TV services website. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the tremendous efforts of staff and district leaders to navigate everything that we're going through and to really put our students first and bringing all hands on deck. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity to hear from the superintendent about much of what has been going on in the planning and preparations in response to COVID-19 over the past few weeks, in addition to sharing some of the work that's underway currently to support teaching and learning for our students. There's been so much going on in these past couple of weeks that I think as a board, we wanted to come together and give students and families an opportunity to see what efforts are underway in the district. We know there are a lot of questions that students and parents and teachers have. Some of them we might be able to address tonight, or our staff may be able to address, but we understand, of course, that so much about this situation is still in flux. So Superintendent Guerrero, again, we're grateful for the team that you have assembled and the incredible dedication that they have shown in rising to this challenge so far. So thank you for taking the time to give us this opportunity as a board to come together and learn more.
Thank you, Chair Constam. Good evening, directors, senior staff. It's good to see everybody. It beats the solitary confinement of the last couple weeks, but I can assure you we have been working nonstop to try to meet our students and our families' primary needs first. We find ourselves in a pretty unprecedented and unimaginable health crisis that is having all kinds of impacts on our community, not least of which our school system. And we have had to mobilize, much like many other organizations, very quickly to try to do our best to maintain some essential services to our students and to our families. So appreciate calling the special session this evening. It gives us an opportunity, hopefully, to share and provide a synopsis of the work to date, the activity that staff and partners in the community have been busy in trying to support our students, and also the trickle of information and guidance that we continue to try to make sense of and operationalize as Portland Public Schools as we receive it, whether it's from the Office of the Governor, the Oregon Department of Education, local and state health authorities. And so our attempt has been an attempt to proceed as thoughtfully and as responsibly as we can. I too am really thankful for the team at the helm, because I have to tell you, it's required every single one of them to step up to the plate, and they have not disappointed. So hopefully, as you hear about some of the activity that has been occurring, you can see there must be a lot of nuts and bolts and details to work through there. And we're still working on those. We too have a lot of unanswered questions. We know our community has a lot of responses that or lack of clarity perhaps in some areas. But frankly, we haven't gotten that lack of clarity either in order to proceed in certain areas. So we're going to start off, if it's okay with the board, to give a little bit of a high-level summary across a few different areas. Really just to remind ourselves, officially this all kind of commenced around March 12th. Governor Brown closed all schools for an extended spring break. Please know there was a lot of conversation at that time among maybe many of the bigger school districts, and the importance of extending the spring break at that time, given what we knew at the time, that might give us some additional time to prepare and take some precautionary measures. It's not a point of advocacy that we took lightly, but frankly, it was becoming clear that it was going to be difficult to operate as a school district when many of our own employees fall into the vulnerable categories. We saw this in a few different indicators, including with large numbers of substitute teachers having called in for educators calling in ill. Many of our substitutes are retired teachers who are also over the age of 60. It was becoming obvious that it was becoming more and more difficult to cover our classrooms safely. Those are some of the points of fact that we also shared with the governor's office. On March 17th, Governor Kate Brown issued her first executive order, 20-08. It extended the school closure through April 28th. It also included 5 requirements for school districts. These are expectations in order to continue receiving state funding. One, that school districts would work towards providing supplemental education and learning supports, that we would maintain a continuity of providing meals to students, that there would be supplemental services like childcare for first responders in our communities, that we would provide some non-educational essential services as well, such as mental health services to students and families. And then 5th requirement, that we would continue to pay all of our school employees. So we can talk about our work in every one of those 5 areas. To date, we have complied in all of those areas to step up, including making a first load of digital content available, making learning packets available, meal distribution. We have offered up a school for childcare for healthcare workers in the Portland area, and payroll has not paused for our employees, which is critical at this time when so many others don't have that same stability. Further on the timeline, March 23rd, the governor issued another executive order, 20-12. It mandated the closure of certain businesses. It prescribed social distancing requirements through a stay-at-home, stay-safe statewide initiative. This order also required new workplace protections where telework is not possible, for example, when we provide essential services to students and families. It was at that time that the growing magnitude and complexity of these impacts related to COVID-19, at that time that PPS stood up its Emergency Operations Center, its EOC, on March 17th. Generally, that's saved for some pretty serious occasions. This is one of those, certainly. This EOC, the PPS Emergency Operations Center, has been working around the clock to tackle all the issues that come up, including the educational supplements and the essential services as defined in observance with public health guidance for health and safety. It's also included digesting the guidance that we have been receiving along the way from the governor's office, the Department of Ed and Health Authority. So most recently on our timeline, less than 48 hours ago, Tuesday night, we received guidance from the Oregon Department of Education regarding expectations for the implementation of distance learning. So we'll also be sharing with you where we are in the preparation and development of more clear details to our families about where we are with our school leaders and our teachers who have dedicated this week preparing, getting accustomed to many of the technological tools and plans that they'll begin introducing to students in the coming week. So as you might understand, changing a school district's delivery model in 48 hours is an impossible feat, but I can assure you our team has been working round the clock in collaboration with our teachers union to arrive at a reasonable, thoughtful approach. And that work's been going on for a while now. So you'll hear a little bit more about that. I'm gonna have staff start with some of the more operational items first, just because those tend to sort of need to be dealt with first and immediately. And if I could have Claire give a little bit of an overview, but I know that we have a number of our chiefs who will speak to some of the elements there. And when I say operational, this includes our custodial, our maintenance, our nutrition services, transportation, childcare, the online resources, partnerships with community, and other communications. So if you want to say a little bit more, Claire, to tee this up for our COO.
Yes, Good evening. I am so proud of the work that our nutrition services and our custodians and our maintenance crews have done this past couple of weeks. They've been nonstop in getting meals out to kids, getting buildings scoured and disinfected, all the things that we need in a COVID virus time. But I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about the custodial crew.
Hello, good evening. Yeah, we've been able to make some good progress in our operations and maintenance areas. Over the last few weeks, our custodial crews have gone through all of our sites and have done a disinfecting clean of all of our sites. And when they go through every room, they actually post right on that room that it's been cleaned, and then they close it. And then if we have to go back into it for any reason, then we go back and we clean that again. All of our custodial maintenance teams have completed closure plans throughout the course of this entire closure. We've also created safety plans as well. So all those have been developed, have been reviewed, and have been issued with staff.
Okay, and I'll continue with nutrition services. On March 17th, 15 meal sites were open throughout the district for food distribution for students and families. And as of today, over 53,000 meals have been distributed to students. So thank you to every one of the nutrition services staff who comes Monday through Friday to prepare food and get things out to our kids. They truly are an amazing bunch of people that are coming together to feed our kids. And then we also have set up a child care at one of our elementary schools, that is in a partnership with OHSU employees who are, first responders to the COVID-19. And we got this set up within a couple of days of the governor's order to provide child care to essential healthcare workers. And we also offered sites to Providence, Good Samaritan, Good Sam, and Legacy Emmanuel. And we're prepared to open if needed. And we've been coordinating with the state and the governor's office in terms of making sure all this is there, as we have the most hospitals in the state. At this point, I'll turn it over to David for some communications update.
Thank you, Claire. Good evening, everyone. It's with communications, we've worked on behalf of the whole district and then in support of a number of functions and groups at the district, including those you just heard about and those you'll hear after me. We've really tried more than anything to keep our community informed, updated, aware, using a number of different channels. Even in normal circumstances, we know that one channel or two won't reach everyone that it needs to. So we have sort of a mosaic approach and just trying to do everything we can, both from a PPS standpoint and working with partners out in the community and government, getting amplification on social media and with traditional media, especially for some of the really important things where we need folks to be aware of, such as sites and where those are and when they are serving would be a really good example there. We have communicated continually. We've had something go out every day for 3 weeks now, really since before the first day of the closure, to families, to staff, to media directly, to the general public. We've got daily website and social media updates. We've had messages from the superintendent and other leaders. We've got a big message from the superintendent later this evening, that will include a video that will accompany that, and also an FAQ document for our home-based distance learning rollout. We've had messages to specific audiences. We've done signage. We've done logo work. We've done a lot of work in support of other districts. We've done work in support of Multnomah County proper and MESD. We've had districts in other parts of the state use our language and especially our translations. And I know this is important to the superintendent. It's important to you all that we are the largest district in Oregon. And it's been really nice for us to be able to provide things like language and messaging and translation for other districts, often just by sharing it with them and using what they can use. We have, I think, been successful so far, for the most part, in engaging media so that they are informed when we have something to share, but also keeping them away from meal sites and other distribution sites, warehouses, things like that, where they could be disruptive and in fact even cause concerns around social distancing, cause anxiety for families or for staff. Local media has actually been very cooperative with that. So there's been a lot to do. We know there still is a lot to come, but it's challenging as times are right now. There's also a lot of important news to share and actually a lot of good stories to share. And what we're going to try to do in the coming days is take some of what we're doing and shift it more towards shining a spotlight on the work. We've done some of that so far, but really shining a spotlight on the great work, with Dan's team, Claire's, Sydney, and those groups. So we're still going to do what we have to do, but we want to make sure, both from a good storytelling standpoint, and also from an engagement standpoint, not just in the community with staff to staff and employee, make everyone feel in this time when we can't be together physically, think about what we can do to make people feel connected to each other and to the district. So we've been really busy, but we've been happy to be able to support.
Okay, at this point, we'd like Don Wolf, our CIO, to speak.
Good evening, everyone. I had to practice my tech skills and unmute from my phone because I was having problems dialing in over my computer. So, a number of things to report out tonight. Hope everyone is well. We are entering tomorrow is the fourth and final day of our first round of device distribution. Over the past couple of weeks, we have planned and enacted a plan to harvest. We've harvested just short of 6,000 devices out of our 9 comprehensive high schools for distribution in this first round. As of close of business today, we have distributed 2,890 devices to our students, with another full day planned for tomorrow. Next week, or because the staff that is rolling those out, we'll sit down and we'll plan and figure out where we're going to look at other schools to meet the rest of the needs in the district. We didn't get all of them. We know there are still a lot of students that are out there that do not have access to devices, and we want to make sure that throughout this entire process that no student who needs a device will not have one. So that's going to take a little bit more effort because we won't have the large schools with the larger inventory of Chromebooks in hand to be able to go to. So we'll have to visit more sites, which means we're going to have to plan and coordinate with Frank's team. We want to be, and Dan's team with our custodial staff, we want to be really careful about how we do that and disturb as few sites as possible to keep them clean and whatnot. So that work keeps rolling. We're working with Jonathan and his team.
Don?
Yeah.
Before you move on, can you just tell us a little bit more about your survey and how you have assessed who needs devices and how confident you feel about the way that we're getting that information?
Sure. So in this first round of device distribution, we felt very strongly the need to react quickly and get as many devices out there as we could. So we put up a form really quickly. We worked with David's team to try and communicate that out and make sure the word was available. We've distributed paper forms to our food distribution sites as well. This second round, we're going much deeper. We had a little bit of time to get some lessons learned from this, get some feedback from the community, our community outreach partners, our ResJ partners. Danny's been instrumental in helping us formulate another plan on how we use our outreach partners to make sure that they're connecting with families, they're connecting with communities, and helping them complete the form. We've adjusted our policy on how the forms can be completed, who can complete them for the family, what information we need, So this time we can really make sure we're reaching all of our at-risk students and all of our students at need that are traditionally underserved.
Hey, Dan, or I'm sorry, Don. This is Julia. Could you share what we think is the current percentage of students with access to devices, and when you're done with the distribution, what we think the remainder will be? Because obviously distance learning without a device is not going to happen.
So I made a prediction when we started this that traditionally the digital divide in most community lands at about 30% of the folks are on the wrong side of that divide. If we keep going at the pace we're going, and what I anticipate, we'll end up at about somewhere between 12 and 15,000 devices is what I'm estimating at this time, which falls in line with that 30%. I have no baseline knowledge to work from in terms of a complete survey that was a saturation survey saying, I do have a device at home, I don't have a device at home. Jonathan and I have looked at older census data that seemed pretty inaccurate at the time, where they were talking about households that had school-age children in them. There was 586 that had self-reported. So not having any great baseline data to work from, we won't know until we get on the other side of this. We also know we're going to have these two main distributions. We also have what we're going to call the third one, which is going to be the trickle effect, where there will be continued conversation and kids will come through. Outreach members, folks from some of our outreach programs will contact us, and we'll find ways to make sure that they get a device as well. But we're really trying to spread the net on this second round to make sure we don't lose any students.
So this may seem sort of obvious, but this may seem sort of obvious, but wouldn't a teacher, say you've got 25 kids in your classroom as of 3 weeks ago, wouldn't we have an opportunity to have the teachers provide feedback on, I've got 10 kids who have access and 15 who don't, and gather it by classroom basis? Or just because I hate to think of 30% of our students getting to the other side, because I think this is going to go on for a long time.
Yeah, so one of our outreach communities, when I talk about our outreach communities, it includes our building principals. So we've been in constant communication with them. They've been using them as a point for their school community and working with their building staff to identify and figure out how they're doing that. So one of the other ways, along with our digital form and along with the paper forms that we're getting in the hands of those folks, is we've provided a spreadsheet for each of those building principals to use in their community with their staff to get that information of those students that they know are at risk, or that they've talked to, or that they continue to talk to on a regular basis, to check their need so that they can provide us that information that way as well.
I have a question about that. Are we also working with our community partners, the SEIs, the ERCOs, the Asian Family Centers, and some of those community-based organizations to spread the word about the survey?
Yeah, that's exactly what one of the key points of this second round and how we're approaching this is folks like Danny Ledesma, who has some of those contacts, Karina Wolf, Lorna Fast Buffalo, those people that have those ties and the access to those networks. I'm daily communicating with them this week, and they're pushing information out to them to try and gather those students and figure out who they are and how they can access, and how we can use those community partners and our racial equity partners to collect that information and either get it into the form that's online and available again as of this afternoon, or use one of those spreadsheets to get us that information, so we don't leave any student left behind in this process.
So I have a question about internet access, because if you can have the device, but if you don't have internet, you're still out of luck. Is this, when you're surveying around the need for devices, are you also asking about internet access, and how is that playing out?
So yes, one of the questions that we do ask is if you have internet access at home, and if not, are you interested in PPS providing that bandwidth? It's not coming back at the same high rate as the need for devices, but we know the need is there. Unfortunately, right now, when we look at the landscape, all of the schools are clamoring for some of these devices, and the scarcity of the availability of the resources is rearing its ugly head right now. Of the current 7,000 responses right now that we've had for a device, there have been just under 1,700 that have said, yes, I need some help with bandwidth. So, and that's just the people that have filled out and have had access to the online form. So we know there's going to be great demand for bandwidth. It's one of those things, as I was starting to talk about, working with Jonathan and the fund and his engagement team and partnering with Comcast to be able to provide their Internet Essentials program to families that qualify, which is typically low income, housing, free and reduced lunch. There's a number of criteria that families can qualify, and the fund seeking resources to be able to pay for that for families for 6 months for free. Comcast is providing the first 2 months for free, and then the fund is looking to fund the other 4 months for that. So that will help up to and possibly a little bit more. Jonathan can speak to how much, if it will go beyond 1,000, but that will handle 1,000 of those for those people that can qualify. A lot of conversations with Comcast around that. They've loosened some of their restrictions. They've increased the bandwidth that's available in that service. And so that's been a very good partnership. We were able to grab just under 800 wireless hotspots, or just hotspots. So we have 790 of those. But with the demand, we're going to have to figure out how we prioritize those. We don't have our hands on those yet. The demand for those was high, so they're a little bit slow in getting to us. I went to look to see if I could find additional ones the day after I got to 790. And that day when I looked at the different vendors that service our area, I was told, yes, we can provide 1,000 hotspots for you in July. So that's going to be a problem we're up against. One of the things that I was going to talk about a little bit later in this was we're putting forth and we're getting ready to polish up at least a section of a website where we're asking people to bridge the divide for our students. So a Band-Aid effort to, if you've got the ability to create a separate wireless network on your home router, on your business router, put it out there, make it open, make it available. We're asking to name it for the students, for student use, and trying to at least get enough people around our community. We'll have a map, we'll have a place where people can sign up and say, I've done this, here's where my network's at. We're looking with other business community partners in the state to push that idea around the state, because we're not the only community that's suffering from a lack of bandwidth and a lack of access. I've been talking with CIOs all over our state and in Washington. We're all struggling to solve the same problem, which is how do you provide access when it's not there. So we're trying everything we can do. We've got an ask to how do we leverage some of the CARES Act fund to build the next solution to make wireless access available. I've got a conversation with Cisco tomorrow to see some of the school districts around the country are doing drive-by wireless access. So how can you stand up wireless access in a parking lot? So at least a student who has a car, a family who has the ability, can drive into a parking lot, get some wireless, get the new resources that may be available on the website, and then go back home and work on them from there. We're trying to be as creative as we can to bridge that divide, because it's big, and it's the biggest problem that we're suffering from right now.
So Don, is the issue that Comcast doesn't have the capability to install it, or that we don't have the resources to pay for it?
I'm not quite, I want to make sure I understand your question, Julia. Is that why we're stopping at 1,000 families? Is that where you're asking?
Right. Is it like that you'd have to have like a Comcast technician come in and install something, or is it that it's the cost and we don't have the cost?
Well, yeah, there is still a cost. So it's $40 for the 6-month subscription, and Jonathan may want to chime in and speak to this a little bit more too, as to exactly what our limitations are. It's $40 per family that we sign up for. So That would be $40,000 right up front there for those 6 months. It does require a commitment and a minimum subscription level from Comcast. I don't know that there's a better way to couch that other than part of the problem is going to be getting families to sign up. Jonathan's team is working very hard on building a communications plan and information that can be provided to folks, but you still have to either call or go online with Comcast, go through the application process, provide them the documentation that you do qualify, get their approval. They will ship the gear to your doorstep, so you don't have to wait for a technician to come install it, but you still do have to get it and get it working in your own home.
So it seems like it's mainly a financial issue. And I guess if it's mainly a financial issue and that's what's going to prevent students from getting instruction, it seems like not something we fundraise for, but actually pay it as a district expense.
In here because I appreciate all the logistical details you're getting a sense of that we've had to contend with. It's an important key question. How can we get every one of our kids to have the access both in device and in internet connectivity? The fact is there's pre-existing equity gaps in that access. There are Wi-Fi deserts in the city of Portland. There are a constellation of providers that aren't exactly turning on their antennas for free Wi-Fi for the next 60 days. And so we're doing our best to try to put mobile hotspots in communities that have never had that level of access. I also want to commend the team for spending their spring break, dozens of staff going into our high schools and retrieving thousands of laptops, disinfecting every single one, asset managing every single one of those, and through an initial survey, getting that into the hands of thousands of families who said, we don't have a device. So that's been Herculean, and there's going to be another round of that. And we certainly appreciate working with partners who can help identify where there's still plenty of gaps. But even if there were the resources, just as we talk with CTOs from around the country, they're sort of challenged with the same issues. There just isn't connectivity in some of our more vulnerable communities. And so, can a hotspot provide the kind of downstream speed and download to engage in some of the learning that we would hope that they have access to? I don't know. Are we going to be able to get to every last student who really needs most the benefit of a device? We're going to try our best to try to narrow that gap, that digital gap that existed before this crisis that is only amplifying these inequities. And we're only talking about technology right now. There are lots of other inequities that we're trying to break down at this time. So, we can certainly talk more about the technology, the operational end of the logistics there, as we continue to talk about the distance learning that we're trying to set the stage for. One thing is to make sure we have the devices. Another is that we have our professionals who are skilled in some of the tools they can use to engage with students who hopefully have access. But Jonathan Garcia, our Chief Engagement Officer, if you could talk a little bit about how we're attempting to bridge these gaps in partnership with philanthropy and business, just as a multi-pronged effort to try to break down these access issues. Jonathan?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Superintendent, and good evening, School Board. So I wanted to share just a quick update on the work our strategic partnerships team and the Fund for PPS is doing to support our students and our families and our broader system during this crisis. So we've been coordinating with the board of directors for the Fund for PPS because I think we truly believe that we're uniquely positioned to respond to the emerging situation on behalf of the district and specifically really around directing donations from caring donors towards some of the areas of greatest need. What we have identified as the three main areas of focus when it comes to engaging with the business and philanthropic community. One is the fund is doing its part to address family insecurities. We launched a community-wide coronavirus relief fund effort to bring gross needed resources to families impacted by this crisis. These are small individual donations that are coming in from across our city, across our state. We have received a little over $30,000 in the coronavirus relief fund. And so right now we are quickly trying to stand up a process to make sure that these dollars are able to be distributed in a rapid response fashion. Two, we're working with, as Don indicated earlier, we're working with him to enable distance learning for students who lack access to device and internet connectivity. So I think what is important, to jump into that conversation that we were just having, I think the work that Don and I are doing are twofold. On one end, we're wanting to make sure that any student who has internet connectivity at home can get it through Comcast Internet Essentials. So we are raising enough money to meet that need for up to 6 months. So we've been in conversation with a number of business and philanthropic leaders around this need. We know that a lot of our students, or many of our students, have housing instability, and so that is the second prong approach that we're taking, which is the conversation around mobile hotspots, right, where students can take those devices wherever they may be. So that's the second area that our efforts are focused on. And lastly, I think we're focused on enriching learning opportunities for students to invest in their growth and in their learning while we build a sense of connectedness with our community and the world around them. So earlier this week, I had the opportunity to share with you the school board 3 one-page proposals that we're using to share with our philanthropic partners. In there, you will see the list of urgent needs that we are working to raise money for. This information will also be found on PPS's website for community members who want to learn more. So in fact, I did want to take a few seconds here to plug our coronavirus relief fund online donation. Again, these are dollars that are going to be dollars that are aimed at students and their families as food and other financial concerns continue to evolve. My team is working with others at PPS, again, to establish an easy and an equitable criteria for how these rapid response dollars will get deployed. And as soon as that information becomes available, we will make sure that the school board knows, that the entire PPS community knows of how families can access those dollars. And for neighbors that want to support our community during this time, we know that there are a number of organizations that they can support, but we ask, if you are able to donate directly on our website at fundforpps.org, or you can also text the word PE to 844-344-1540. Again, that's on the website. It's, as Stephanie Soden just messaged everybody, it's fun and easy. Like I said earlier, we've received over 30,000 and hopefully continue to receive more. What I've been most impressed, I will say, with during this crisis is how coming together to support our community. Businesses have also answered our calls. 2 weeks ago, we announced a partnership with Lyft. Thanks to Lyft, we have made available ride credits for families in need so that they can visit the doctor, pick up food, nutrition hubs, or even go to the grocery store. As the superintendent will be sharing in his video message later this evening, I'm also happy to share with you that a tech company, DoorDash, has partnered with us as well. In coordination with PPS staff, we're working to begin delivering meals and other learning materials to students that are at high risk of getting sick, or students who have physical mobility issues that prevent them from visiting one of our 15 pickup sites. And then lastly, like Don and we've talked about, we're working to provide free internet access to any, and I mean any family in PPS who needs it for the 6 months, for the next 6 months. And so as I wrap up, I just want to take this, every donor who has stepped up for our students during this time. I also want to send my appreciation to the number of friends and our business partners who are working hard and digging deep to support our communities during this crisis. Thank you, really, thank you. I will the school board via email, in person. I know we have scheduled calls, one-on-one calls with all of you, and I'm always a phone call away. And as always, I'm open to answering any questions.
So that's sort of the first half here on a lot of the operational aspects of this crisis we've been confronting and gearing up for. We want to spend the second half of our briefing talking about the academic components, the continuity of learning that we're trying to remain focused on. I mentioned at the onset that we just received Department of Ed guidance a couple nights ago, and which is sort of outlines these expectations, which superintendents around the state are working with their teams to make meaning of, and frankly, to see how we operationalize to making a lot of those expectations true. So we're crosswalking work that we had anticipated would be part of our continuity of learning plan. So we're crosswalking our emerging plans with that guidance. We have been spending this week working with our principals, teachers, as they prepare for student home-based learning. And here's another acronym for everybody, PPS HD, home-based distance learning. So I'm going to invite our Deputy Superintendent for Instruction School Communities, Dr. Craig Cuellar, to sort of be the leadoff batter for the team that's going to talk about the various aspects that are going into the planning for distance learning. Craig?
Thank you, Superintendent. Really appreciate it. Good evening, board. It's great to see everybody. I just want to first start off by saying, thank you to all of the departments that you had the opportunity to hear from leading up to the conversation around teaching and learning. If it wasn't for Jonathan's team and for Don's team, Dan's, Claire's, and David Roy's, we wouldn't be in the place that we're at right now to be positioned to do incredible work for children. I do want to first start off by saying that the Instruction and School Communities team has been working feverishly around the clock for the last 5 weeks or so. To be able to lift a virtual learning platform in such a short amount of time is truly a Herculean effort from the entire team. And it has taken every single individual from multiple departments to be able to bring this to fruition. I also want to start off by saying that there is no blueprint for this. I was on a conference call this morning from several of my colleagues, other deputies from around the country, and other systems like PPS are equally in the same place. Some have different challenges than we do. A lot are very similar. And being able to have the opportunity to brainstorm around ways that we could potentially position ourselves to be in the lead to do this work. The superintendent gave a little background around the Distance for All a guidance that came from the Oregon Department of Ed, which is giving us a timeline of April 13th to be able to lift off our virtual learning platform. The team has already worked on a timeline and a plan that already put us about a week and a half ahead of what the timeline was by the ODE. And so the team has already worked to position ourselves in planning through April 29th, but also ultimately planning for the unknown, which could potentially be longer. And we've also planned for that as well. I want the board to know that virtual learning is not a replacement for the traditional classroom. You can't replace the classroom environment where you are with your peers and you have the face-to-face interaction with your teacher. And that's not what we are touting the virtual learning platform to be. It is absolutely a supplementary learning platform that we are hoping that will continue to engage children, but most importantly, provide continuity of those relationships between educators and students. So that continues through this time of need. I want to make sure that we understand that it's more than just learning. We have a lot of children and adults at the same time that are experiencing trauma and stress, during this health crisis. And we're really cognizant about that. So when we talk about virtual learning, we're also talking about whole child wraparound supports for kids. And what does that look like during this time of need? How are we being cognizant of the SEL supports that we're providing? How are we making frequent touch points for students to continue to have access to their counselors, social workers, their administrators? And so I just want us to understand that it's not just the virtual platform that we're lifting purely for teaching and learning, as it absolutely is an important aspect of this work. But we are also being extremely deliberate in how we're infusing our SEL and our wraparound approaches to make sure that our children are taken care of, not just academically, but also socio-emotionally, which is so critically important right now during this crisis. So with that being said, I'm going to have Brenda that's going to lead in and talk about the importance of the SEL work and how we are infusing that into our virtual learning plan. And then Brenda's going to open it up for both Dr. Valentino and Dr. Bird to talk about specifically professional development for teachers and what is going to be the instructional expectation for our students. So Ms. Martinek, without further ado.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent, and good evening, Board. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Brenda Martinek, I'm the Chief of Student Support Services, and I have been involved in the EOC and have been standing it up as the co-lead with Molly Emmons. We have been working around the clock to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible and that we're problem solving things at a moment's notice and really working together as a team to problem solve together. And I can't thank our EOC core team enough. They have been amazing. They've been instrumental to the work moving forward. And it's really been a time that we have come together as a district and as a leadership team to really put what matters most in the forefront and in the center of all of our discussions. So I really want to tell the board how successful that has been. So I am talking tonight about the SEL, the social emotional learning. I want to first talk about our mental health supports. So as we started with this, the first day that students were off, we assembled our mental health contracted providers, made sure that they were talking with their students, continuing with their caseloads, and providing virtual therapy sessions and then connections. So that was the very first thing that we did. We also made sure that counselors and our mental health therapists had all of the links virtually for suicide ideation, student threat assessments, sexual incident issues, so that we would continue to be able to help support those really critical services. The next thing that we did is we made sure that all of our meal sites had mental health supports or mental health access, so that as families came up, we were able to provide them with resources on the table, translated in all of our languages that we support, and just a person that they could connect with and check in. It wasn't therapy, but it was a check-in so that we could make sure that we're just checking in and making sure people are okay. What we did this week is we have been developing our social emotional learning curriculum and trainings Additionally, there are some specific policies that we needed to make sure that staff were aware of. And so we also developed professional development in accordance with our professional conduct policy, Title IX expectations, and digital citizenship. So we are continuing to do that. We're also looking at 504 plans for students and special education and how we're going to be able to accommodate students with special needs. In regards to our SEL, this week we did provide a 2-day training for all staff to be able to learn a little bit more about social emotional learning, how that was going to impact themselves and their students virtually. And so now we have been developing weekly 20-minute lessons and then 5-minute check-ins for teachers to be able to do with their students. The other thing that we've been working with Dawn is to get access to phone services through Remind so that counselors and staff can make sure that they can actually have that personal connection with students and with families so that we can continue to provide supports and resources and just a helpful and caring listening ear. I want to give kudos to our translation department because they have been outstanding through the past couple of weeks, working around the clock to make sure that all of the critical information that we are providing to students and families is translated. They have done a remarkable job. So I just want to give them kudos for that. And then the biggest thing that Sean and Luis and I have been doing is making sure that we continue with that alignment with Student Support Services, Teaching and Learning, and the Office of Schools. And so that has been a continued alignment and effort. And so we have started to develop teacher guidelines and expectations. We have worked with Sean to help communicate with principals and help support staff in the many needs that they have had. And so I want to talk a little bit about that alignment, which is regards to our teacher expectations and our guidelines. We're really combining the SEL work along with the academic instruction because we know that these times are really emotionally stressful and traumatic for families and students. So we want to make sure that we have that caring touch right alongside the academic instruction because instruction is crucial. It is the most important thing that we can do. And we just need to do that with a soft and caring touch. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Sean so that he can talk a little bit about schools. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Brenda.
Good evening, everyone. Sean Berg, Chief of Schools. So as Brenda said, we've all been working together to ensure that principals and teachers understand the expectations. So of them, I've been working with PAT leadership. We've been having many collaborative conversations about how to best roll this out, giving flexibility to both teachers and students, as we know that people are dealing with a lot. But we also know that we need to ensure that our kids are getting what they need in order to graduate from high school, and also for younger students to have some routines and some semblance of normalcy in their life. So we have a couple of big decision points that we're waiting on, primarily from the ODE for graduation requirements, but we have some different plans in place. In terms of Q3 grades, I just want to talk about that for a minute, that we have decided that we will extend the marking period so that students who left school on March 13th, they had about 2 weeks left of the grading period. It's supposed to close April 6th, but we're going to go ahead and extend that so that students who need to improve their grade in high schools, I'm talking about high school right now, will have an opportunity to work with their teacher to turn in work or to to demonstrate mastery of concepts. What we've been very clear about with schools is that it cannot hurt a student. It can only help a student's grade. And we know that some students are not going to have access to devices yet. So the no student will receive a failing grade at this time for Q3. They will be either be able to catch up, or they'll be able to be given an incomplete grade and be able to finish that work working with their teachers. So we're maximizing flexibility for students and as well as for teachers. We also talked with PAT about expectations for learning. So we know a lot of we don't think students can sit in front of a computer screen for 7 hours a day, nor would we want them to. So there'll be some activities. There's some expectations for check-ins with students over time, over each week. So there'll be some asynchronous learning activities available, as well as some synchronous check-ins with students. And then there'll be some time that students are doing some independent work. But it's very clear that, and the PAT is absolutely in agreement with this, that every teacher needs to be checking in with their students. That looks different in elementary school than secondary school. So in secondary schools, they're sort of dividing up the caseloads and being a little creative about how they're working with students because of the number of students they have. So, the schools are being flexible about how they're meeting the needs of students. Elementary schools, they generally the same, they're self-contained classrooms, so they have smaller groups of students to work with. So that's what we've been working on. We are waiting for, again, the guidance from ODE about graduation requirements, and that will determine how we proceed with Q4 and in terms of grading for high school or not grading for high school. We have talked to elementary principals about progress monitoring, because the ODE guidance says we need to monitor progress. That means a lot of that can be interpreted lots of ways. So we don't want to disadvantage students who are unable to access technology and unable to access the help of a teacher regularly. So we're going to make sure that we're doing some informal assessments and those kinds of things to monitor progress. And so MAF has been working with Luis Valentino's office, who has put out a whole lot of materials for teachers to use. So I'll turn it over to him to let him talk about the work that they're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bird. Good evening, Superintendent Guerrero, Board President Constant, board members. This week, we're in the middle of what has culminated extensive preparation and work from various individuals and departments, but I want to specifically acknowledge the senior directors of the Office of Teaching and Learning for the work that they've been doing over several weeks, working 12, 15-hour days, and the support that they received from members of their team. And so that work that they've been working on, as you can already know and are understanding even at a deeper level now, has been a difficult task, and it has been because it has required very rapidly shifting from one modality of teaching learning to a second one. And so what we had to do at first was to actually build the infrastructure to allow for that to happen. And that infrastructure was to ensure that we had the capacity to teach online, and second, that we had the resources necessary to make that happen. And so as Dawn and this team are working on devices and is working on broadband and bandwidth, one thing that we needed to focus on was how to ensure that our teachers were prepared to teach in a different way. And so the team rallied around in creating a phasing in process. And phase one was really about providing students with the applications and the platforms that they might be familiar with already so that they could begin to do the work. And so Kevin Cratchit and his team actually stood that up a couple of days after we went on the extensive leave. So that has been almost online for 2 weeks, which has been incredible. That led us into phase two, which had focused on addressing the expectations that were aligned with ODE. But with the changes in ODE guidelines, we've had to adjust accordingly. But the plan has been to set clear expectations that continuation of learning would be the primary focus in the academic side of the house. And so the team began to develop content almost immediately that to be used on our online platforms and be available to teachers and site administrators for the teaching and learning experience once we got to that part of phase 2. And so that included then, how are we going to prepare the teachers? And so we have focused on using 2 teaching and learning platforms and 1 curriculum management platform. We're using Seesaw for our early grades and Google Classroom for the upper grades. There are also additional platforms being used for specific programming, and so Canvas is also being used, but primarily the first 2 I mentioned are the ones being used will be used by our teachers. This week, they have been spending time learning how to access and use them. So there are online professional development modules that they can actually access to become familiar with them and begin to get comfortable in how they're going to use them. At the same time, there is online support as well as call-in support for those teachers who need additional guidance and support on how to access and use them. Beginning Monday, April 6th, we will have a slow rollout of the teaching and learning part of the second phase. And so to the degree possible where teachers can actually begin to contact students, begin to download the content, they will begin the teaching and learning process. The ODE has formalized that step for April 13th. However, because we've already had so many teachers who have begun this work, we are still moving forward with the week of April 6th as an instructional week. However, that week we will also use to troubleshoot, to complete the distribution of any devices, the provision of broadband, so that by April 13th we will have better capacity to truly implement the home-based learning initiative, so that at least most of our students will have access to that. There will be ongoing professional development and support for our teachers online, as well as via telephone, to make sure that we continue to provide what they need in order to ensure the implementation of that. The support is aligned with the expectations, and the expectations are aligned with ODE guidelines as well as the agreements made with PAT to ensure that we provide the necessary flexibility for our teachers and our students to access the contents they need, to apply the practices they can, to ensure that our students are continuing to show progress towards the end of the year. And so our planning is to work into June. And if, of course, if we return early, well, fantastic, we return earlier. But the goal and the plan is to plan for online and home-based learning until June.
Dr. Valentino?
Yes.
This is Amy. Thank you so much. You mentioned the facility. I don't know what that's.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Sorry. You mentioned the facility, obviously, because every family's circumstances are different and every teacher's circumstances are different. But what about, can you talk a little bit about expectations of consistency between classrooms, even within a given school? Like, is there an expectation that grade level teachers are approaching things in the same way, or system wide? Is there that expectation?
So one of the things, thank you for the question. So yes, there is the hope and the expectation that we maintain as much alignment and coherence while we are working in a totally different environment. And one way to do that is to provide the content centrally. And so using Atlas, our curriculum management system, we will be and they have been already uploading the the content onto those platforms, and so teachers will retrieve them. And what that does, and whether you're a third grade teacher, fifth grade teacher, anywhere in the district, that content will be the same, and so that will be available to every teacher, and so that allows for some internal coherence to remain while they're working more independently than they would have in the past. In addition to that, in working with Sean, there are administrator expectations, right, that principals will carry out during this time. And part of that is to create some consistency in how they come together for professional development through PLCs, through staff meetings, et cetera, that will allow for those conversations to take place. And so in addition to teacher expectations, there is a development of administrator expectations that help to provide some of that internal coherence that aligns the conversations that took place prior to having to go online, and that will continue using platforms like Google Hangout for teachers to come together, to plan together, to have conversations. So that there is that. The other part of that, which we agreed would not be a viable option, was to secure specific time slots during the course of the day, as much as we felt that would help with that coherence. But given the context of how of teachers' lives, right, and students' lives, and the distribution within a family, that we could not hold teachers to specific times of day. However, what we have made a recommendation to the superintendent is the amount of time per day that teachers would spend on time on task, let's say, and then time for professional development and time to come together and we would continue to provide resources and support to ensure that internal coherence that we need to have to ensure that we move students collectively all the way to the end.
Yeah, if I could just jump in and add to that. We are expecting principals to hold faculty meetings weekly, so they'll have a chance to meet with their teachers and set expectations. That started this week, and we're also expecting teachers to meet with their teams to plan. So there are definitely flexible options for teachers, but we do want to make sure that there's a consistent experience for children, even though, I mean, as much as there can be. We know that devices are still being rolled out, but we are trying to really create a sense of normalcy among faculty members. So that's why we want to continue with our professional development that we would normally have in a staff meeting, as well as time for teachers to plan together, so that the experience for children is consistent on a given first grade team or third grade team in a school.
Chair, so I think at this point it might be good to pause here. You've heard from staff on a lot of the operational and now the academic work at the school side. I want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to ask questions. It really has been a remarkable collective effort, not just from the cabinet level staff that you see on the screen, but the teams behind them. And I also want to do a shout out to our educators and Portland Association of Teachers, because this only works if we try to pull it off in partnership. And I think we've tried to be clear that, particularly in this coming week, that we really try to reestablish those connections and engagement with our students. And so while this week's been focused on coming together as a faculty and learning how some of these educational technology tools can be helpful, what we want most is for our students to remember they're part of a community. I'm going to turn it over to the chair to moderate questions, but I would like to highlight, just take another minute to hear from Danny Ledesma, because I do think, and I think Director DePass was approaching some of this, there's some inherent equity issues in this work. I said this before, they were pre-existing, they're only getting amplified during this time. And after Danny speaks, we also have our regional superintendents on the line here. So they're working closely with our principals. If you're looking for that on the ground perspective about how the field is also, really working hard to do right for kids, they're also available to speak to that as well. But Danny, do you want to say a word before our directors pose their questions?
Hi. I would just say that in addition to all the good work that the instructional team is doing, we have our partners who are really interested and have continued to sort of like engage the students that they're working with. I think it's really important as we move through this crisis that we continue to think about how our students of color are disproportionately impacted, not only by the changes in the instructional model, but also just health outcomes, mental health outcomes, trauma, all of those things that we're talking about. We need to still sort of hold tight to our aspirations around really wanting to focus in on our students of color. So I've been really inspired by our partners that we contract with that are culturally specific. We asked them to sort of revise their scope of work given how it's changing over because of remote working, and folks have come back and have been really utilizing their relationships, and you can really see how the relationships that they've established with students and families are coming through with the remote learning. So I've talked with several of our providers. We have one provider who held a sort of like town hall with African American community members and sort of went through all of the different resources that are online for parents and community and family members to be able to work with students. We've had a lot of our larger organizations who are shifting their away from group work into more personal connections with students, keeping that up. We have a lot of collaboration that's happening with our providers and administrators. And so it's been really inspiring to see that work carry on. They are also starting to think about what are online resources and professional development that they can offer. So one of our partners is offering a series of sort of like lunchtime learning where it's sort of like, how to take care, how to stay connected in these times. So it's been really, really good. And I think that the more we sort of work to cultivate a culture that's about collaboration, that's about really sort of standing shoulder to shoulder with one another, and being continuing to be vigilant about the disparities that our students of color face, I think that we'll be in a good way. So more to come.
Thank you, Danny, for that important connective tissue with our community-based partners. We had three aspects to this briefing tonight we're hoping to cover. One, our initial sort of response to this crisis, our work to date to prepare for distance learning. And I know we also are forecasting an inevitable economic impact that is likely to affect school districts in Oregon. We'll take on that third part, but I thought it'd be important to pause here and take directors' questions.
Yeah, I think, Danny, you make a really good point with the change in the guidance that came out this week. I think there's a lot of concern that those new or revised expectations really exacerbate our ability or inability to differentiate for our students. And there's a lot of worry that with expectations of individualized, meeting individualized need without the resources, that our most vulnerable students will only grow further behind. And that those with the resources will be able to easily, access online platforms. So I think this is really a problematic area, particularly expectations around monitoring student progress. We know that our students are going to have very different ability and circumstances to engage with their learning. And it's not just a question of how much the adults care or how much the adults seek to engage all their students. There are many more factors than that.
So this is Julia. I've got a question on the sort of on the academic side. And I want to thank all the district staff for really standing up the meals, the custodial work, childcare for the essential healthcare workers, getting the devices out, setting up the fund. I think that in short order really set us up for the next phase. And unfortunately, I think it's a phase that's going to last through the end of the school year and potentially into next fall. So it's with that context that some of these questions I'm going to ask, that I don't think it's we're 5 weeks and we're in recovery, but that we'll have sort of an ongoing COVID response, potentially reimportation, go away, the reimportation along with the deep recession. So just keeping that in mind, it looks like the ODE made a shift in their most recent guidance they issued on Monday from supplemental education to distance learning for all. And in their guidance, one of their things is, each student has access to a licensed or registered teacher through telephone, writing, electronic, or online means each session day. So if we're looking at this as it's not for a 5-week period, but potentially, 8 to 10 months, I'm wondering from staff, in order to meet this guidance and actually also looks like provide credit for high school students, keep them on their path to graduation. What is it that we need to do? What fundamental shifts do we need to make in terms of budget? So we were planning for a traditional school year. We're now not going to have one. What sort of budgetary resources do we need to shift or personnel in order to be able to sort of meet the instructional needs of our students, or what may be a very extended time period?
Hi, Julia. It's Craig, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll partner with Claire on the priority and the budgetary ask. I do want to just echo something that you did mention to start off with is, and something that I wanted to make sure that was definitely said was I wanted to definitely give out just a profound appreciation and kudos, to the teaching and learning team and, to the student support services team and the school performance team for working around the clock to make this happen. I just want to make sure that they know that they're appreciated. A lot of the team members, as you heard the superintendent say earlier, a lot of us forwent our spring break, did not have a spring break. A lot of the teams were in the warehouses, packing arts kits and materials and resources, putting together curricular resources and packets, shuffling curricular resources out to the nutritional hub sites. It truly a full wraparound effort by the entire team. I just wanted to say thank you to that. To answer your question, there is still a lot of guidance that we are still waiting on. The team has done a really good job at putting together a blueprint for what's going to lead us through an extension of closure. And like I said, Director Brim Edwards earlier, is that we planned for the virtual learning platform to take us through the 29th of April, but we also planned in the event that the closure is extended beyond April 29th. And we do have a rough blueprint for what that looks like. A lot of the things that we are putting together that David Roy touched on earlier was that we were going to send out to families a FAQ guide that was kind of actually that's going to go over some of the questions that what you're asking, specific to around communication. What is our communication platform that we are going to use for students to make sure that there is connection for students to teachers and to counselors and to administrators. And we do have a platform that we're working on that Brenda and Dawn have been partnering to be able to push through a communication platform that we're hoping to release really soon. I can let Dawn or Brenda talk a little bit about that. And so in terms of the learning plan, from a priority standpoint, that is the priority. I think the team has worked together to push together during this crisis to where the priority is everything that is wrapping around how we're cleaning and sanitizing our buildings, how we're staffing all of our meal sites, how we're ensuring that we're feeding children and families, how we're making sure that children are cared for, that we're making sure that the learning platform is going to be up and lifted for all of our students and teachers and community. That will always be the priority at this time. I do want to open that up a little bit for Claire, because I know that this is also a little bit of a segue into the budgetary conversation. And so Claire can talk a little bit around some of the steps that we've already made to prioritize this from a financial standpoint.
Thank you, Craig. So I'll go ahead and start in on the budget impacts and service implications. The impact of the pandemic to our budget and service levels is expected to be similar to the Great Recession of 2008. Maybe it's coming on a little quicker than the other, and we need to prepare for whether it could be a long term or it could be a quick rebound. So we need to plan for both. We have some potential federal and state relief coming, and also some reductions at the state level. While Congress approved a $2 trillion federal stimulus package, and we expect the governor and Oregon legislature to respond accordingly, it is still very unclear what the total fiscal impact will be as a result of the economy's downturn. We expect that significant budget reductions are imminent and are working with our district colleagues and state partners to understand the exact magnitude. In addition to anticipated cuts to the state school fund, we've been told that full funding of the SIA, the Student Investment Act, which is currently $39 million to us, is very unlikely. The next state revenue forecast is scheduled for May 20th, with an advance preview to the legislature scheduled for April 28th. At this time, we're recommending that previously approved milestones and decisions included in the budget calendar be delayed to allow until we are in receipt of this information. So as we look at reduction scenarios, to be prudent in our 2021 budget planning, we're estimating budget reduction scenarios ranging from 4 to 9% of the district's budget, the largest of which could total up to $60 million, not including potential cuts to the SIA funding, and also not including federal stimulus. So the spending and hiring freezes we've implemented over the past week, we've implemented spending and hiring freezes through the end of the fiscal year through June 30th, 2020, and into school year 2021 with limited exceptions. We've also restricted district-sponsored travel and non-essential professional development through December 31st. In terms of, we also have a bond sale for our capital programs. That was it was scheduled for this morning, but with the volatility of the market over the last couple of days, we delayed the sale. We'll be looking on a day-by-day basis to find the right time to sell. We have plenty of time to complete the sales, but we will continue to monitor the market with our financial advisor, our underwriter, and our bond counsel. We're also experiencing an unusual investment market. At our April 7th meeting, we will ask you to temporarily, as a board, to waive a portion of the investment policy for 120 days. Currently, if we were to invest in U.S. Treasury instruments, we would not earn interest and would lose money on the investments. The safest place for our funds right now are in our banks, in our U.S. banks, and our policy currently restricts this to 10%. And we would like to expand that percentage on a temporary basis until the investment market settles. So watch for that coming in your packet for next Tuesday's meeting. In terms of a budget calendar, we were planning on bringing a revised one to you on April 7th. At this point in time, we want to hold off until we have a better understanding of when the governor will hold the special session of the legislature, and more about the timing of the economic forecast information coming from the state. It's likely we'll have an abbreviated virtual budget process this year. So it'll be something new, and I'll be working with board leadership to make sure that we have an adopted budget by June 30th as required by law. So at this point, I would like to turn it back to Guadalupe Guerrero, our superintendent, for any further comment.
Thank you, Claire. So the impact, of course, is not just on our community from a health and safety point of view. It is important to start foreshadowing the economic impact this will have on our school district. You heard about some of the immediate measures that we're taking to preserve precious resources we think we're going to need to try to fill a pretty significant budget gap in the coming school year. And there's going to need to be a lot more conversation, obviously, especially as we would typically be in our budget development process right now. So again, this is another area where it's hard to proceed without additional information at the state level coming to school districts. It's the same challenge that our colleagues are having in other school districts. So, Chair, it's we're here to take your questions on any and all of the above topics we've covered tonight. I appreciate everybody's patience and adaptability these last couple of weeks, and as we proceed forward, it won't be perfect, but I'm going to trust that our educators and we will keep our kids, our students at the center in the middle of all of this.
This is Rita. Can I step in here? Can I ask a couple things? So in no particular order, I have a few questions. Let me take the probably easiest one first. This is probably directed at Brenda. Can you talk a bit about any mental health or emotional support resources that are going to be available to teachers and other staff during all this?
Hi, Rita.
Hi.
Yes. So we have a number of different mental health links and resources for students and for staff and for families. What we've done is we have continued to provide those resources on our website, through emails, and in our teacher guidelines and expectations. We will also have a number of links available. They also have access to EAP, and I know that EAP is providing counseling services virtually now. So that is another area that teachers, staff can also access mental health resources. So we're really trying to make sure that we're available for staff. James Loveland and Amy Rona have done, as usual, a phenomenal job of making sure that they are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to support principals, staff, teachers, nutrition workers, whoever calls them, they provide that support at a moment's notice. So, so we are there to support anybody who needs us.
Okay. And sort of broadening out from this, I don't quite know how to put this. I think we all need to recognize and acknowledge in our planning that our entire society is being traumatized even as we speak, and we're just at the beginning of this. This is going to get way worse before it gets any better. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that we have to have realistic expectations about the kind of learning that can happen in an environment where everybody is under enormous stress. So I guess, I mean, I appreciated what Craig was saying early on about how we're looking after the well-being and safety of kids. And for my money, that is absolute top priority, because I think, I mean, the people I have talked to, and, you know, I'm certainly experiencing it myself, this is tough. This is something we have not experienced as a country in 100 years, and we are not prepared in any way to either in terms of the technology or the social supports to kind of weather this without great strain and stress for everybody. So I'm not sure there's a question in there, but I guess I think it's important that we as a district be very clear with parents and students about what is a reasonable expectation for the kind of learning experience that is going to be possible during this crisis.
Rita, I'd like to add to what you just said. I'm not sure if that was a question, but in terms of reasonable expectations, I think it's worth discussing whether it makes sense to have continued dialogue with ODE, because in the new guidelines, there's clearly more of an expectation that this is business as usual, just in a different modality. And I think if we're really being honest with ourselves, especially around the issue of differentiation, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to serve all of our students equitably. There's a difference between putting supplemental instruction forward and providing the resources that teachers and families need, and, you know, making it clear to educators that we expect them to be available to their students to a certain degree. There's a difference between that and the very clear mandate that every single individual's student's progress will be monitored and recorded and supported.
I want to jump in on that too. I really appreciate you, Rita and Amy, bringing that up. And I also want to give my deep appreciation for the senior leadership team that has missed out on a spring break. I'm sure it wasn't, I'm just missing out on spring break and putting in the hard task of trying to solve these unprecedented problems. I feel like we should also have a dialogue about pushing back a little bit to ODE, that the guidelines that they've published are rigid and are not realistic, especially given the fact that, you know, we have teachers that have kids at home, and having this learning time in front of the computer is I'd say we need less of that, not more. I wanted to ask Jonathan if we'd thought about working with Nextdoor in terms of getting these, getting neighbors to open up their networks. I've worked with them in the past. They've been very amenable to working with me. We give them the opportunity to do something positive for a change. No matter what you say about the neighbors on Nextdoor, at least it's a venue for getting information out. I wanted to share that every low-income housing, multifamily housing building in Portland is eligible for Comcast's Internet Essentials. And those buildings, the individuals and families in those buildings should not have to go through a screening process. If the building is considered low income, that is people that are earning 60% or less of the area median income, the entire building is eligible for the Internet Essentials. And finally, I think we have an opportunity right now to not only provide pushback to ODE, but to rethink how we build resilience within our communities. It doesn't matter if we have a huge earthquake, how much water we have stored up, but it will matter if we know our neighbors. And this might be the opportunity to slow down and to really support our vulnerable families in the best way we can, communicate with our families and lighten up on the requirements to, have this very prescriptive learning environment. I don't think that that's a lot of learning is going to happen when our families are under stress. I'm really concerned about the kids that are experience great stress and won't be able to fully get the benefit of any educational tools we roll out.
So I want to second the suggestions to push back on ODE. Looking through their guidance, it just seemed to me to be highly theoretical and very little acknowledgement of where we are in any district, never mind in PPS. And yes, I don't think it is. Some of their expectations about how much time kids are going to be sitting in front of a computer, I think are unrealistic. And it expects, I think, a great deal of direct instruction by parents, which is unrealistic, I think, on many, many levels. So I would endorse us using whatever leverage we have to get ODE to reconsider some of the expectations.
To
So
me,
this is Julia, and I guess I would want to say that I think that the ODE expectations are in a framework, and I think we can. I'm in agreement with some of the comments, like the parents serving as tutors, which most of them are not equipped to do or provide that. I also think, though, it's the guidance is thinking of this isn't going to be a short-term issue for our community. It's going to have a very long tail, and that we, in the short term, yes, we need to care for our students and also figure out what they need from an instructional standpoint and how we can best support them in just unprecedented times. Because, you have students who, if there'll be plenty of parents who are able to help their students individually because they have other resources. But that if we don't, attack the challenge, I think that we've been given of both to support our students with their very most basic needs, but also if the public school system doesn't try and move the ball forward on the instructional side, a lot of our students aren't going to have other options. And so I view it as more them putting out a challenge, and not because they want to torment us or, put out mandates, but I think the realization that we're going to have a different normal for a long period of time. And the students who are going to be most left behind are those who, don't have the resources. So, to challenge us to, try and do our best and to, figure out how we can provide instruction in different ways. So I think we should be careful in how we push back, because I don't think their intent is to do something, to the districts or, give us an impossible task. I think they're looking at how do we, operate in this new normal, and here's our best thinking about having to do it. I mean, they're also providing, full funding, state school funding, which I think that is, it's not like if you can't do something, we're not going to give you resources, but really like trying to lay out a challenge. And if we can think of a better way to do it, then we should challenge them. But I don't think we can say like, we just don't like the way that you've, set it out. I think we should try and stretch ourselves and try and find a different way of working, because I do believe this is going to go into next school year.
So can I just comment on that? At the moment, according to the latest executive order from the governor, we're scheduled to be back in session on April 29th. If they are contemplating not having that as the opening date, then they need to be telling school districts and parents. And I don't, my expectation is that we will not be able to come back by April 29th. And it seems to me that with every passing day, we're losing an opportunity to get out in front of this. So I would encourage ODE and the governor's office to make an actual decision and announce it so that we can all understand what it is that we're actually looking at for the foreseeable future. The other thing that I would say is there seems to be an expectation that just shifting to a different service delivery model, moving from an in-person classroom to online teaching is a relatively easy thing. And from my personal experience, I can tell you it is not. It is a whole other animal. And we are going to be asking teachers to completely change the way they approach every aspect of their job. And we're trying to give them a little bit of professional development ahead of it, but as good as the professional development may be, 2 days worth of training in online teaching is not going to make teachers, it's not going to make any teacher adept at the task. And I think we just need to be upfront about that. This is not going to be an easy transition for teachers or for students. And I think I understand the aspirational goal for ODE, and I also understand that we may well have to be thinking about this as a much longer term phenomenon than we're currently thinking about it. But I think we also have to be realistic. And I would encourage us to encourage ODE to do that.
I think, Rita, like extending people grace, in this process is that we're all like, for students, as somebody at work who's transitioned to, I'm 5 weeks into like not having only left my house twice. It's a totally different way of working. And I think we all need to extend everybody, our students, our teachers, grace, and that we're all trying new things. And I think that's part of it. But if we don't sort of jump in and find out how we can start operating in a new environment, we wait, I fear that we're going to be waiting for a long time.
I think we've heard tonight that, we have jumped in and we as a district have developed resources ahead of the game and ahead of guidance with ODE. But before we move on, and while we have Craig and Luis and Sean on this call, and also Liz, Superintendent, could you or anybody on your team talk a little bit about, candidly, about our prospects for truly differentiating to meet all of our students' needs in this environment? And Liz, I'm curious about your take on what the barriers that we have in terms of meeting special education students with disabilities.
Well, being successful at differentiating for diverse learners is a challenge for any school district on any regular school day. Now, when you're changing the delivery model almost overnight, it's an extra tall hill to climb. I think you heard a glimpse from the team about how we're attempting to give this a very good faith effort to meet our students where they're at, to support our educators and connecting with our students. A theme that runs throughout the 29 pages of Oregon Department of Ed's guidance, calls out care, connection, and continuity of learning. We certainly would hope to sort of have some flexibility around what that might look like in Portland Public Schools. I do appreciate that superintendents and district leaders from around the state have had recent regular opportunities to talk to Oregon Department of Education leaders, Colt Gill, as well as associations and organizations up and down the state. I've really appreciated the conversations with my peer superintendents, both our neighbors here in Multnomah and the bigger districts in the state. We're all contending with how do we do this and proceed in a thoughtful way. I have not heard anybody say that they're going to have no issue complying with every line item, the way that it's articulated in here. I know that the Department of Ed is
We've lost the superintendent.
Lost Guadalupe. Yeah.
Well, that tells you some of the challenges with online learning right there.
This is part of the virtual community challenges for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we're waiting for Guadalupe to dial back in. Amy, I can address at a high level some of the issues, and I certainly want Brenda and others to weigh in who have deep subject matter expertise in special ed in terms of those differentiated learnings, delivering FAPE, complying with IEPs, holding IEP meetings in their due course. All of those are very much a topic of conversation at the state and national level because it's hard. There aren't currently in the federal legislation, it is not possible to waive those requirements. So, and it's important not to waive them, right? I mean, this is serving some of our students who need more support, not less, particularly in this time of change. So I think what I would tell you is that it's a area of intense focus. I don't think anyone has solved it yet, but it comes up nearly hourly in every conversation we have about how to do that. I think there are conversations with the special ed community that are going on to help collaborate, to look for additional supports, to figure out how we provide differentiated instruction, and we comply with the really important laws that we deal with all the time. Brenda, I'll let you, with much greater expertise on what it actually takes to deliver that, offer a few thoughts too.
Thank you, Liz. So I do want to let you know and agree completely with what Liz said. It's very difficult currently to be able to provide specially designed instruction while we are in the midst of supplemental learning, and then next week starting our digital learning. And so what we have been doing is Mary Mertz, our Senior Director for Special Ed, and her team has been working around the clock to make sure that we are doing things like getting our assistive technology devices out of classrooms tomorrow so that we can get them out to schools. We are also we've also set some expectations for each type of job description for students or for staff who work with students with special needs in regards to developing a case manager caseload, making sure that we're connecting with students and families so that we can help families as they navigate being the child's first teacher right now, providing accommodations for how students receive the instruction, working with our general education teachers on modifying or providing additional accommodations or differentiating support. Additionally, for students on IEPs, because we are currently focusing on literacy and math, those will be the areas that we have to provide specially designed instruction. So one thing that I want to make everybody aware of is when students in the general education setting, whatever is expected of them, then that's what special ed would receive, because that's called FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education. So if students aren't receiving lunch and recess and science and art, PE, if they're not receiving that direct instruction from a teacher, then special ed
teachers are also not then required to provide that. So I do want to be clear about the scope of work that is required for special education. So because we know that students with special needs really desperately need this support, what we also want to do is work on routines and transitions with families, because oftentimes, the students that are there in the home, they're not understanding that their daily schedule and their routine has changed. So what we want to do is we want to work with those families and help develop some home routines as well. So we just want to make sure that we are providing the supports that families need for students with special needs. And so that's really our focus. Also providing that mental health support and just around the trauma and the extreme nature of the social distancing and not being able to have a clearly defined routine for some of our students who are our highest needs. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. We are continuing to get further guidance from ODE. The superintendent and Mary Mertz and I have a phone conference with ODE tomorrow. So hopefully we will continue to get further guidance from the special education direction at ODE. So any other questions? I'm happy to answer them.
So, directors, if I may add, this is Luis. One of the challenges, as noted by Rita and others, has been that equitable access to learning, and so the senior directors who've been charged with this work, Tanya, Sarah, and Aurora, have had to be really mindful of the impact of that on all populations, right? So, but because we are also building the infrastructure and setting a foundation, being discreet enough in identifying the supports needed for the needs that are needing to be met proves how challenging this whole work is, right? As they develop the content for this work, they and their teams need to really work more closely with Brenda's team to make sure that we are more thoughtful in how we're differentiating on the front end. But then we're also doing this in an environment that is not familiar to most of us in using it as a teaching platform, right? So differentiating for students who need additional devices, who are used to having supports of someone sitting next to them, who are oftentimes pulled for very, very, very discreet, direct instruction. All of those things are things that our teams have to think about as they're developing curriculum to be taught in the absence of face-to-face in many cases. And so that has proven to be challenging, no question. But if we are extending beyond, which is why I said earlier that as we're planning, we know that we're going to be more comfortable with it. Hopefully our teachers become more comfortable with it and we then support. So we will get better at getting better so that we can continue to provide that. One, because if we don't open, we won't have any choice but to continue to do that. And so we need to make sure that we are at our best, whatever the decision is made, how rigorous we get, or how broad and deep we provide that service, the best service that we can provide.
I want to try to wrap things up by 8:30, but especially Ailey or Scott or Andrew, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Scott. Quick question that I'll take the answer offline has to do with video, the role of video in terms of connecting teachers and students, and whether teachers will be able to see students and whether that's a good idea or not in terms of privacy issues. So I just want to put out there, and if somebody can respond to that and share that answer with us, that'd be great. I just want to thank staff, and the opinions we've heard tonight. I think I hear staff saying, yeah, caring for kids in this traumatized time is most important, And yeah, we need to pay attention to doing the best we can, especially for our most needy students, in terms of delivering some kind of education that we know is not going to be on par with classroom, but we have to do the best we can. And I am so incredibly appreciative for hearing both those from staff. A final issue I want to lay out there, and again, take my answer online, and I've talked with some staff about this already. State of Washington has suspended all construction except for what's absolutely crucial around safety concerns. I don't think we should necessarily wait for the state of Oregon to come around to that point of view. I'm concerned about safety at our construction sites. I know it would be incredibly disruptive in a lot of ways to stop construction, but and I know staff is reviewing the issue, but I want to lay that out there as an issue. I think that was everything else on my kind of question list. Has been covered. And then just finally, we need to lobby Congress heavily for assistance to state and local governments beyond that first package. You know, we're talking what, $1 trillion, something like that, that we're going to need across the country. We need to push heavily for that. That's all for now. And just again, thank you. And I'm greatly appreciative for the incredible work that staff has done.
Director Lowry?
I am here. So I did also want to give thank yous, especially to our teachers. I know that we've talked about how hard this is for our teachers, and I know that we have lots and lots of them already working on this. I, as a parent, have received like 4 emails today alone about the survey, and I had received emails about it earlier, but had not filled it out. So I know that those communications are going out there around the survey around who has access to technology and Wi-Fi. I did have a question about how we can be communicating to our constituents some of these details, and was wondering if there, I know we've been getting briefings from Stephanie and updates, but I would really appreciate maybe from the comms office, occasional, like here, I found the fund image that we shared, and about the coronavirus account, really helpful. I could tweet that out, put it on Facebook. So it'd be really helpful if we had a couple of those other, just every once in a while, an infographic or some talking points that we could tweet out or share, just to help with that communication piece. Because I know that, you know, the best way for our constituents to be informed would be to have them watch this meeting. And other than, you know, those few people who are super engaged constituents, I don't think that's everyone's cup of tea to listen to us for 2 hours. So what are those like bullet points that we could help to communicate out? So that's my one kind of comment and question. And again, thanks for all the work staff has continued to do.
Yeah, so Ailey, I like completely agree that it would be great, because I think we're in unprecedented times, so I think parents aren't even sure necessarily somewhat what questions to ask, or you know, because the central office is shut down, like, and they don't necessarily have access to their principal. Is just how do we think about just elevating the level of communication so that everybody has an opportunity to, you know, just better understand where we are, even if it's you know, here's what we're trying to stand up, and that's why you haven't heard from us, and thinking about different ways to engage maybe our the advisory groups, whether it's the special ed parents advisory group or the TAGAC for talented and gifted, having sort of virtual town halls, just to, you know, in this, I think this time people feel really disconnected, and the being isolated and disconnected and not having a lot of information. People either become, you know, more worried, scared. They then end up, you know, it feeds up cycle that's not necessarily productive. So I think the more that we can share information 2 ways through a variety of different channels, look to parent groups to get out information to other parents, because we're all, I think very somewhat isolated these days in, our homes or wherever we happen to be at, at the stay-at-home moment.
Yeah, and I've been using some of my, campaign media that I created to reach out to people that way, and trying to tweet every day or every couple days just to continue to put information out there, because I think you're right. The more we can sort of over communicate is really helpful.
Andrew?
Yeah, I'll be really brief because I know it's late. So I really appreciate the thorough briefing tonight by everybody. I hope that it didn't take you too much away from the actual work that you've been doing, but it was helpful for us and hopefully helpful for the public to get a sense of that work as well. I'm just really proud of the staff and the work that's gone into the last few weeks. I think that when you think about the enormity of this situation, the unprecedented nature of it, I think it really speaks to the expertise of this leadership team and the ability to respond very quickly. And although there are obviously things we still need to do and things that we might want to do better moving forward, I think it's really worth asking this question, if this had happened 5 or 10 years ago, would the district even be at the place where we are now in terms of redeploying the computers and getting ready for this online learning? And I agree with the praise for the teachers as well. We've had great communication. My kids have had great communication from their schools and from their teachers, and we need to make sure that's consistent throughout the district. But I think I've seen a lot of really great things from the teaching staff as well. Finally, just in response to some of the comments from other board members, I think people are raising really, really good issues. I think in a crisis, it's worth separating out your short, your medium, and your long term. And particularly when you think about the response and being resilient, we're so much, so much still in the short term. We are only a few weeks into this. And I think all governments, all businesses, all households are figuring out exactly how we're responding in the short term. There's going to be a medium term where we start thinking a little bit more about these longer term issues. And then there is the actual long term where we plan. And there are so many unknowns. And I completely agree with Director Brim-Edwards. We do need to be planning for the sort of worst case eventuality. But I also think that not that there's a lot of time for that, but I actually think the focus right now needs to be on standing up, the immediate needs, and then we can turn to that in the very near term. So I just, again, really proud of the staff, and you guys are doing fantastic work, and thanks again for the briefing.
Superintendent, before we adjourn, is there anything else you'd like to say?
I would. First of all, thank you, directors. It really has been a collective effort. I'll continue to say I'm appreciative that I have the caliber of folks around who can really run and really address these issues. But I would say my concluding remark for tonight is really for our educators out there, our teachers and our school principals. They're having the real conversation on the ground right now about how are we actually going to do the best job we can do for students. Yes, we're in a crisis, but how do we also leverage this opportunity to reground ourselves in what education outcomes we really want to see out of our students? We still have a graduate portrait. We have educator essentials. It calls for critical thinking. It calls for empathy. It calls for agency and making sense of the world around us. All those things are super true right now. And I know that our principals have and our teachers are also staying up late, are also giving a lot of careful thought, have already started making phone calls to students, especially students who most need to be hearing from us, feel a sense of connection to their school community. I'm incredibly appreciative that we're thinking of our most vulnerable students at this time. And then I'm also super empathetic to the plight of our high school seniors because my daughter's having the same experience. This second semester of their senior year is not what they imagined it was going to be. And so I feel that some of those traditional rituals may not be part of their experience as we close out this school year. So I'm definitely thinking of them, and more importantly, want to make sure that there's no disruption to their post-secondary plan, career, or college. I want to make sure we do the most thoughtful job that we can do to get as many of them across the virtual stage as possible. So I know we're awaiting official graduation guidance. We've certainly weighed in and provided our input. I hope it lands in a reasonable place, because I know our high school principals and counselors are thinking about all of our students, despite this crisis, rounding out the school year in a successful way. So just a big thank you to our educators, counselors, principals out there who are having these conversations to do the best job they can do during this time period. So thank you to all of them out there.
Speaking of our high school seniors, Maxine, I know you're still here. Is there anything you'd like to share or ask? Maybe not anymore. All right,
Maxine,
thank you.
you're muted. Maxine, you're muted.
I got it. I'm muted. No, I'm good. I mean, I'm like, okay, I'm doing the best I can right now. Just trying to stay grounded and do a lot of baking and spend a lot of time with my parents and my cat. My cat is my rock right now. But yeah, I'm just sad, and I think everyone else is sad right now too. But hopefully, you know, we're just able to keep living, and I'm just excited for my next year of life. And just, I'm done talking now. I just, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Max. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight. Thank you for just all the efforts on the operational side. And I think this conversation was really helpful for all of us with regard to what learning is going to look like moving forward, and that we still have the same sense of urgency around our students' learning that we've ever had. And we feel it from our teachers, and we feel it from our students themselves and our families. It's just going to look a little different. So incredible work, everybody. And next time we convene, we can talk a little bit about how it's going out there. This special meeting of the Board of Education is adjourned.